There are numerous locations across both Remnant games, 14 in total according to the wiki. I thought it'd be fun to figure out which location is best and rank them based on the following: the atmosphere and overall design, the physical space itself and traversing it, world building, lore, secrets, events, NPCs, basically all the stuff that makes that planet unique, and the enemies and bosses. Now I won't directly be ranking bosses as I have an entire video on that alone. The points I mentioned are just all contributors to the location ranking, as they greatly influence how much you'd want to repeatedly play and explore a world. With that out of the way, let's get on to locations, and let's address a few of them that have been listed on the wiki. So for Remnant 2, they're counting a lot of the DLC as separate locations, whereas for me, I'll just count everything that's from one planet as one single location. While Ward 13 is well done in both games, and it has a bunch of puzzles, secrets, and NPCs interconnected with it, Ward 13 is still mainly a hub area, so it's not really a location in the same way the rest of the ones that I listed are, so I won't be ranking them directly within this video. Let's start with the first location in dead last place, and we have the Labyrinth from Remnant 1. Now this shouldn't surprise anyone, there's a total of 0 enemies or bosses within the first game's Labyrinth. Not only that, but it's always the same. I do like that there are a couple events that tie into other worlds, and then the items you can get from those semi-secret locations are pretty cool, but at the end of the day, it's just a transition zone. We have Ohio up next. Once you've fully explored it, there's no real need to explore it again. The enemies here are alright, although they're more on the simple side, mainly since it's the same little baby alien thingies 90% of the time. Design wise, it's pretty cool to look at, and lore wise, I have no idea what the area is supposed to be. Like, I get it's a destroyed Earth, but it's never really explained at all its origins or anything. Level design is pretty good, there's a fair amount of secrets, which is always nice, and the bosses are definitely the saving grace for this place. Particularly the final boss, since the enemies here aren't even unique, as you can encounter them in the Root Nexus on Yeisha. With all that, it shouldn't come as a surprise that this one's going in C tier in second last place. This location here is actually well done. This area is in the same boat as Root Earth in that it has no adventure mode replay value, which is why you can't even make an adventure mode for it. Now I decided to keep these separate instead of just making it one ranking for the Labyrinth, just because there's such a big contrast between the first game and the second one, since this one does it way better than the first game. Exploring this area is actually fun. There's a good amount of hidden loot and straight up bullshit. The level design and hidden areas in the Labyrinth are awesome, though many of these puzzles can only be discovered through the wiki because of how brutal it is to stumble upon them, or doing it through trial and error is close to impossible. In my opinion, the enemies here have the best animations out of any other enemy type in the game. These Rocky Boys are just so expressive and lively. Unfortunately, there is only one boss, and it's the most gimmicky boss in the entire franchise. Solid location. I'd love to see a full-scale Labyrinth with different tile sets and randomness in the future. From here, the line begins to blur a little bit since all these locations start to get really good. Raysum claims the bottom of B tier. This is because it has the smallest amount of bosses compared to all the other areas within Remnant 1 and 2, but it also has one of the most BS boss fights that can stun lock you depending on the modifier due to freeze and no iframes when you're getting hit, but that's a topic for another video. The events here are cool, and I do like the NPCs along with the world building and lore. The enemies are different enough from the rest, and of course being a snow planet helps it stand apart from the other locations in the series. So exploring it's nice, though the main reason for Raysum's lower ranking is its scale. It would be nice to see this area again in Remnant 3, but on a more larger scale with more bosses, enemies, etc. Rom is a good location with a super good boy. That should go without saying that the NPCs are great here. The Undying King being the most notable since he's super important, and the entire level design is based around him. Which I'll say the Fallen City in the Sand is a nice aesthetic. The villages within the Rock Canyon is also cool, and it's a nice break from the open areas with the sun beating down on you. The ancient Techie temple is also pretty cool with the constructs and everything, and it's a big contrast from the open desert kind of world, but it actually does work out. Speaking of ancient constructs, the enemies in the areas are quite cool. You have the big brutes that rush you, you have robots with their little pew-pew staffs, bad dogs, and others. Again, a mix between like tech and the villagers that inhabit the wastelands. The bosses are solid, and fighting things like the Claviger is a joy, even if the animation spinning the plate is broken. And the Haro is a unique fight, being the only boss with a one-shot mechanic, but also giving the most powerful weapon, at least until it was nerfed. Big thing holding back this area is the lack of events for loot. A bunch of other areas have more fleshed out secrets and world building events. The pressure plate thing here is cool, but it seems kinda half baked, with the answer just straight up given to you on a wall, rather than something else like world building wise. Rom is a good location that's a lot of fun to explore, but there are better ones within the series. Corsus, the only location in Remnant that got its own DLC and greatly saved its ranking. The swamps of Corsus are pretty interesting to look at, with a bunch of huts above shallow waters, which, as a side note, deeper water areas if this place is ever added again. The two cave locations are also well done, the first being a swamp cave, and the other being a temple cave or like this citadel fortress type cave thing. The events here are pretty cool. One that I really like is the one where there's this little beetle and you have to like shoot it before it gets away. The level design of the physical space is very Remnant 1-y, and what I mean by that is that Racem, Corsus, and Rom all have fairly similar level traversal. So if you remove the like visual elements and just replace it with like basic blocks, they're all fairly samey with flat open spaces and then small structures here and there. Not saying that's bad, that was kind of the thing for the first game. Enemies here are good. My favorite would either be the swamp shark dog thing or the bug guy that throws his hammer at you. Bosses for Corsus are also pretty cool. The big dude is a fun fight, the double butterflies are okay, and the Iskall Queen is also pretty fun, especially if you drop the stalactite on her. The regular bosses, particularly the two newer ones, are also really good. The struggle between Corsus and Rom in the story is also very nice. I will say that the Rom NPCs are better, but I think Corsus is slightly better from like a level perspective, hence why it's slightly higher ranked. Narud, another area saved by its DLC. It went from having the worst open world area to having the most unique and interesting out of all of them, thanks to the glider mechanics of the Dark Horizon DLC. I guess I'll elaborate a bit more, but when you get the Tel Rotha open world, the sand area is way too large and there is a lack of proper direction. It is very hard for a new player to navigate with the fog and, no real location showing where to go on the map. This makes for a sucky first player experience, and if you just watch any video where somebody happens to get this as their first world, it's the most common complaint that it's just big, open, and boring. If you get Shalhala, the world is much better since it's significantly smaller. The Ancient Lab is a big contrast from the overworld, which kind of makes Narud the ROM 2.0, since, open sand area and then ancient temple under the sand. The big tower are also very different, but somehow all three of these very different areas work together. Similar to how the robots manage to work well with their Nerudian zombies, despite being very different. On the topic of enemies, Narud has one of the more simple ones in Remnant 2, apart from like the EDVA enemy type. However, the bosses on Narud are some of the most unique in Remnant 2, and are really well done, especially Shalhala and Alepsis Tora. The story of Narud is also the most tragic of all the worlds, with them searching the universe for life to find Alepsis Tora at the end of their journey. After entering, some catastrophic events happened where centuries passed in an instant, the dead became alive and the living died. The universe also died its slow death because of how much time had passed, so now it's just a cold, frigid void, only for your character to finally come along after all of these events. You, the different form of life that they were searching for. So while their journey was kind of in vain, it also wasn't at the same time. Secrets are awesome, the NPCs and level design, again thanks to the most recent DLC, is solid. Let's go with a location that everybody knows, Earth. From a lore perspective, it is very well done. A post-Root invasion area where there are hints all over the place of what went down as Earth got invaded and, fell to ruin. The level design is good, it's arguably the best in the first game. Again, it's kind of Remnant 1-y where it's very flat with no platforming or any real verticality. Although of all the environments, this is the one that has the most verticality thanks to having buildings that you're able to explore. That said though, there isn't much point in exploring the buildings. It does have a good variety of tile sets though, with city streets, subways, and sewers, with different sets of enemies depending on the location, and a wide variety of enemies at that. My favorite and least favorite at the same time is the two-sword root dude that always spawns behind you, and he'll block your shots. He's a new player's worst nightmare, and I love them for that. The bosses on Earth are also solid, with Shroud, Gorefist, the Mangler, Riphide, and Brabus. They're all on the simpler side mechanically speaking, but the lore and secrets around these bosses, especially like Brabus, who makes his way into the second game, is awesome. Additionally, other things like Riphide that's in Leto's lab, and then getting Leto's armor set, and really cool stuff. World bosses, of course, we have Singe and the Ent, technically the final boss from the first game as well. And on a note of technicalities, Subject 2923 added a good amount to Earth, with the new really awesome farm area that I just love running around under the moonlight in. Not only that, but Ward Prime is a good puzzle area. It falls into the no point of doing it again since there's not much to explore. I think the biggest reason for Earth ranking higher than Narud is just the sheer amount of content. You can technically even count Ward 13 from both games as part of Earth, and La Somme nets our second place, where two worlds collide on the inside. Okay, not really, they collided on the outside. A slum, Bloodborne type area filled with Dran, and the hallowed and beautiful Fey palaces, along with the twisted and dark Fey palace variants, cities on fire, dark sewers, and dock areas. La Somme for sure has the most dynamic aesthetic and level design thanks to this. Now, world building and NPCs for bosses and everything is just great. This is basically the only world where the bosses talk to you and you can interact with them beyond just fighting them. The bosses are also just super epic. The Red Prince, which feels like a world boss, Gruin, the Huntress, Knockwenddle, and of course the world bosses are just visually stunning to fight. Even the less grand Nightweaver has great buildup and an amazing fight. The enemies are also solid, the Dran are simple but effective, the Fae have more unique combatants, particularly the Knights that teleport around to mess you up. Again, the world building is great. A king that somehow unknowingly kept two worlds separate, but when he was put to sleep, the worlds collided. In the world's weakened state, the Root tried to invade, and the Red Prince set the world ablaze to stop the invasion, which is just so badass. From there, there's the power struggle and everything that you can experience firsthand within the game, and of course there's that one true ending, which I believe is the canon ending. La Somme is just filled with great events, secrets, and it's deserving of being so highly ranked. And in first place, Tiesha. This one might surprise some people, but if you think about it, it actually makes sense, as this is the only location that has had 2 games to establish itself, 3 if you count Chronos. Yesha is the most visually stunning area in the first game. It has a beautiful forest filled with dangers and wonders. Exploring the forest at ground level and seeing the temple's wooden structures is just breathtaking. The temples themselves are also really cool to explore, and if you're in the treetop canopy within the Pan villages, it's also just really awesome. Now within the first game, Yesha still hasn't been invaded by the Root, or rather the invasion is just starting, which makes a stark contrast between the 2 games, since you can see how the Root has ravaged Yesha, but even then there is still beauty to be seen and saved. The hidden grove from the Forgotten Kingdom is still untouched, which is a super nice attention to detail since it's, hidden so the Root hasn't quite found it just yet. Level design and storytelling throughout the location across both games is just unmatched. The story of the Pan, the Forgotten Tribe, its guardian being killed by a human in the Chronos game, then the Wanderer in Remnant from the Ashes comes and helps the rebels against their struggle against Genus and her tyrannical reign over the Pan, and then finally the player in Remnant 2, the Traveler, coming to drive the Root from the shores of Yesha is pretty poetic. A human caused all these problems, then a human comes along, kinda fixes it, and finally, they set things right. Taking down the Corruptor and Ravager is not only awesome lore-wise, but these are some of the best boss fights in the series, the Ravager being a great fight in both games. All the bosses are pretty cool, not just the world bosses. You have stuff like the Blink Thief, Stormcaller, Stone Warden, Cinderclad Monolith, and more that are just really well done. The enemies from across both games are also really unique and nice to look at. More so in the first game, since the enemies in the second game, which are the Root, aren't really that crazy. I love how the Pan walk around with their lanterns in the first game, just as a little side note. Pair that with Yesha's secrets and puzzles in every single map, and it's just so well done. And there's every location in Remnant ranked. I got a couple other Remnant videos on my channel and more coming soon, so consider checking those out.